Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Simmons, the president and founder of Astronomers Without Borders, and we have a special hangout today, a great program with two guests who happen to have been hanging out and stargazing with President Obama and his family recently. Vivian White is one guest who will be familiar to AWB members, people who have watched these programs. She's been an astronomy educator with the Astronomical Society of the Pacific for the past 10 years. And with her degree in physics and a Dobsonian telescope and a fascination with human learning, she inspires people around the world. She designs activities for amateur astronomers engaged in public outreach through the NASA Night Sky Network, which is a coalition of over 450 astronomy clubs across the United States, and is part of the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, where she works. She has traveled far and wide with her love of astronomy, including recently teaching astronomy to Buddhist monks in India. Some of you saw that great hangout that we had her on, and visiting some of the world's largest telescopes in the Andes. And if you want to learn more about Vivian, see her blog at myheadisinthestars, all one word, .wordpress.com. We also have Tim Spuck, who is the STEM Education Development Officer at Associated Universities Incorporated, which we'll talk about and let you know what that's all about. Tim has been active in STEM education for more than 20 years, including efforts with the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, as an Einstein Fellow at the National Science Foundation. I don't think you have the hairdo for an Einstein Fellowship, Tim, and teaching astronomy and earth sciences at high school and college levels for more than 20 years. And he's led numerous educator training programs throughout the U.S. and abroad, developed a wide variety of astronomy experience for learners of all ages. He's an active amateur astronomer as well, and has directed astronomy outreach and PR efforts, and has led observatory design and construction projects. Tim is also the principal investigator for two current NSF-supported programs, the Chile-U.S. Astronomy Education Outreach Summit and the Astronomy in Chile Educator Ambassadors Program. So I welcome both of you very much for this. This is going to be fascinating. You both have great backgrounds, but we want to find out what it was like hanging out with the first family, doing astronomy on the White House lawn. But we also want to talk a little bit, too, about why this was a good thing. Aside from being fun and lots of good photo ops, why is it worthwhile doing this kind of outreach in a special event like this? So Tim, let's start with you. Here's a picture of you where you've got yourself getting set up in front of the White House. There's a mobile planetarium there as well. Not a lot set up yet, but did it get really crowded there on the lawn?
Well, we certainly had lots of room. I mean, the south lawn of the White House is actually pretty grand, that it's a spectacular place to be. Mm-hmm. And I think that you know, as the night progressed, we probably had, I would say, close to 300 people in attendance at the event that evening, perhaps a few more. But the real fun, and Vivian will attest to this as well, was actually getting all of this equipment through the gate and through the Secret Service and all of the inspections that had to take place before we could actually get the stuff to where it is.
Yeah, that's something I was curious about, and I have not heard anybody mention or write about, is taking all this stuff onto the White House lawn. I mean, that's all this gear and everything. What did that entail? What were they doing?
Well, you obviously can't drive up to any of the gates at the White House there, and so what we had to do was we had to park about a block away and unload the vehicles of all of this equipment, and then drag it a good DC block to the gate, and then of course all of the equipment, the cases all had to be opened up. They had the dogs come around and sniff all of the cases, of course, looking for potential explosives, things like that. And so it was was really that process took about I would say about a half hour,
Mm-hmm.
and then getting through the rest of the security as far as your IDs and making sure all of your paperwork was in order, and then you had to come back to the gate and drag everything onto the White House lawn, and so depending on how much gear you brought, that ended up being a real workout.
Vivian, how much stuff did you have with you?
I brought very little with me, actually. It was great. I carried everything in myself. I brought an 8-inch Dob, an Orion, that I had just put together that morning. So rather than ship my exact same Dobsonian across country, I realized well, the ASP actually bought the exact same telescope. I got there into DC about 3 o'clock in the morning and woke up before we went to the White House and built the whole thing in the backyard of where I was staying, and dragged it into the White House, which was great. So I didn't have that much, that and a pair of binoculars and some star charts and things. Anything that could fit in my purse.
Vivian played it. I think Vivian played it smart. We tried to bring in. I had my Subaru Outback loaded down with a Meade 10-inch and tripod, and a Celestion 8-inch and its tripod, and this Orion 10-inch, the Dobsonian, the picture of there, and it was. I know I had a workout.
Yeah, but Tim, you're local, right?
Yeah, so I hang out in DC quite a bit because that's where my primary office is. So when I'm not on travel elsewhere, I hang out a lot at the AUI office there in DC.
And so you had the disadvantage of having the advantage of being able to drive everything there, which would be
right.
travel.
Yeah.
Travel is sometimes a good thing in getting things done. And you have Tim, you've got some more pictures that I think we'd like to take a look at here as well. Liam, what have you got here? So here's the White House as it's being set up for the assembled crowd. Did everybody get to sit there during the presentation that the president kicked it off with?
Yep, I think Viv and I, we had seats up there, and there, of course, was standing room only for everyone else, so there were quite a few people standing around in addition to those that were seated.
Yeah, and then we see here, too, a picture, which is the best you can get. There's the president and a spaceman standing next
yes.
to him. And and then finally to the events. This is a picture. Now, who is this that's looking through this telescope?
This is one of the MythBusters guys, and his name escapes me at the moment. And then Sabrina, who is a new hire at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, and then this here is this is one of the ISS astronauts. That were at the event. There were a number of astronauts at the event milling around.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think we have some other pictures there as well of the astronauts and so on that Liam will be able to bring up. Vivian, how close, well, both of you guys, where were you located on the lawn? Was there a better place to be closer to the White House, or better to be farther away from the White House so it wasn't as difficult?
Yeah, some of both. So Tim was very close, right on the main White House lawn. I was a little further out, which was great. It was darker, but it was also downtown DC, so it wasn't that dark. So I was out. We were by a big fountain with a little bit of mist going on for the evening.
Wow.
Just to keep our telescopes well lubricated.
Now, here we have Liam Kennedy of Image Beam, our producer who always does these for us. We'll have to get him to take a bow later. Has brought up the president and his partner there. One looks more animated than the other. I guess this spacesuit is it looks like the real deal. Something for taking a stroll in space while you're visiting ISS.
Yeah,
And,
Yeah.
it was a
and
mock-up. They had a real gold helmet. The front was gold plated.
wow, wow.
Yeah.
And how long did the president speak, and did he make any interesting remarks?
Gosh, he is so eloquent. Seeing him in person is even more amazing. I was surprised. I mean, I like his speeches in general. I like the way he talks. But he speaks in full sentences. There are no ums or thoughts. He's really just so eloquent. And seeing him in person was a big treat. He talked for maybe about 20 minutes, half an hour,
Hmm.
about the importance of innovation and science and inspiring the next generation of scientists. It was
That
wonderful.
those would be comments that probably everybody there agreed with.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think that so yeah, he talked. Presentation was probably about 20 minutes in length, and I think that the key thing that he was one of the key points that was he was trying to make, and that I think so many of us are trying to make with young learners, is that there's a whole world out there to discover. The science, the reason people do science is because of all of these questions and all of the great things that remain to be discovered. And I think this was a way for the White House and for the leader of one of the greatest countries in the world to come up and to say and to put this idea of discovery and students engaging in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and the learning of these subjects as a priority for the nation. Uh, you know, when you look back, this is the first president that I know of that has gone to these efforts to do these star parties, to do the science
Right.
competitions and science and engineering fairs at the White House to really say to the world, this is incredibly important, and if we're going to solve problems, and if we're going to learn not just more about the universe, but solve the issues of climate change, solve the issues of population and agriculture that the world is facing, that we need you to be inspired. And I'm here inviting you to the White House of the United States of America and put you on center stage and tell you and help you to understand that's how
Well,
important this is.
yeah, but then there aren't that many people there. I mean, it's literally one out of a million people. If there are 300 people there, 350 people. So there were not many people right there, and of course, there were a lot of people watching elsewhere. Here's a picture we have of a young lady who had the task of telling the president how to look through the telescope. Does anybody recall who she? I've seen a lot of pictures of her, and I don't recall who she is or why she was up there with the president. Do you guys know?
I don't recall her name, but she is a high school student from New York City,
Hmm.
and she was there to provide some instruction to the president on how to look through the telescope and to provide some instruction about what he was seeing when he was looking at the moon.
And that's what he was looking at was the moon. Okay, so
Yeah.
And it was
we know.
great. He noticed that it was flipped, that the image was flipped, and he began talking with her about optics, which I was so excited and impressed by.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
And so, who went to this besides you guys that do outreach? But there were students and so on. How did the lucky ones like you guys get to go there? And not just the outreach people, but there were other people who weren't bringing telescopes. Like any star party, they were just there to go around and look at everything. Does anybody know what the selection process was?
I don't actually.
Haven't heard a
I,
thing about that.
No,
Like
I,
few local schools.
there were many local schools there. I know many teachers who were science educators. A lot of their students came. Um, I think most of the students were local.
Right. I think yes, they were because there was no funding for transportation to the event. So the majority of the students were local from the D.C., Baltimore area, and as far as how people were invited, what they what folks looked at, I know that the Office of Science Technology Policy had contacted the National Science Foundation and NASA and other organizations to identify exemplar programs, things that were happening that they knew about that were astronomy related. And then that's, I believe, how participants were how they kind of sifted through and identified potential people to attend.
Mm-hmm. And I know you were talking about how there were only 300 people there. I think probably why I was there is that I worked with the woman, Meredith Drosbeck, who was putting it together to help get the word out to astronomy clubs across the country. And many of them held events as well that night. So people across the country, where it was clear, were also looking up at the same time that we were trying to make it more of a nationwide event. And there were even some events in other countries I saw.
And I don't want Viv to sell herself short, because she does some incredible programs and has done some incredible outreach efforts. And
we know
I think
so. I had some contact with Meredith too, although it was kind of last minute, and I was hoping through Astronomers Without Borders to get events going in other countries as well, but when I checked the site, it was only sort of set up for the U.S. and just sort of didn't work out. But next time we would do that, and I want to talk too about why this is important. But let's, we've got a few other pictures here that I'd like to talk about who is there, and maybe then turn on to other things. This is a panel of astronauts, clearly. Was this a Q&A session with them? What was going on here?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Viv.
No, go. I'm cutting out. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, this was a Q&A session that took place after the president spoke, and all of the participants were free to roam or to go around to various stations that were set up. And this was one of the stations that was set up, which was a Q&A with the astronauts.
Well, and then the astronauts were free to roam as well. And I think, Liam, you got a picture of John Grunsfeld, who is head of science for NASA. I don't remember the exact official title, but a former astronaut who did an awful lot of work too. He's actually an astronomer, so he was one of us who got into actually became an astronomer astronaut. And an interesting station here, I guess NASA was showing off some of the astronaut stuff here. Do you guys get a chance to walk around and check out these things too?
Yeah, we were lucky that we got to go even earlier. Before all the people came, we got to go see. It took us a couple hours to set everything up, and then while that was happening, we saw how they were growing lettuce on the space station, and the meteorites, and the moon rocks, and the astronaut gloves. They have, on the front of them, they have mirrors so that they can look back and see all of the readouts of the dials on the front of their suit.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. And then you mentioned meteorites. We have a picture of a station there as well. So here's a family. I've always been curious, how did this family get invited? But we don't know the answer. Who's showing the meteorites? You guys know who this was?
I don't know who that is. No.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure, and I don't know that this was necessarily a family that was there in attendance. This very likely could have been either a chaperone with some kids or things like that. So I'm not sure. I don't know of any families that were invited to the event.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And finally, we have a picture, and these last pictures we're showing, by the way, are courtesy of, though they don't know that they were being courteous, but we've snagged them from the space.com article on the White House event. So we should give them credit, at least since we're stealing their pictures to use on our program. And so
we should stress those are not campfires underneath there.
That's yes, yes,
Although it was very cold.
Yes, we would have liked to have had them.
yeah. So we have the typical red lights and star party, and this is so a few of the telescopes that were out there. This is a little bit of a hilly area too. So, but this is on the South Lawn someplace as well. And people wondering, this looks like any other star party, pretty much. Looks like it was a little bit chilly too, as Tim said.
Yes.
Tim, are these your telescopes? Are any of these yours? I feel like
No,
that's the
none of
sun.
these are ours. I think this was the third station that was set up. Not there. There were, I believe, 3 telescope stations or more.
4.
4. There were 4 stations set up. So these were not any of ours.
And we each had approved objects to point at. They had
Really?
made it through the White House scrutiny, and they kind of picked 4 or 5 objects that we should point at that evening, and each station pointed at one most of the evening, sometimes 2.
Do they have to be approved as not being objects that threaten national security?
They
We
wanted
did
to
joke about that.
to look at certain spots of the sky. No, actually, it was what would actually be visible through with the extreme light pollution that would be in the area, and
Makes sense.
they wanted to try to make sure that as the people moved around to the different stations, that they actually saw different things, and so I think
Yeah.
that's what it was about.
Yeah.
This is a little bit more organization than the typical public star party.
Yes.
A little bit.
Yeah, they're so controlling there at the White House.
Yes, yes, they are.
But it actually made for a great event. It was nice. We got to
Absolutely,
look at
absolutely.
different telescopes, the same object through many telescopes, and talk about why they look different.
And I want to mention too, which I didn't mention up front for those people who are viewing this live, there is a Q&A app which you can ask questions, and a couple of people I know well have actually popped some in there. David Ingram, who is a dark skies activist who does an awful lot of outreach as well, and Andy Sherwood from Astronomers Without Borders both have some good questions. One of David's is basically what are the other luminaries, so to speak, of education public outreach that were there? Vivian was there, and Tim was there, Tyler Nordgren, Rob, Sarah Ballard, Rob Sparks from the National Optical Astronomy Observatory in the U.S. was there.
Bill
And
Nye, the science guy, was
Bill
there.
Nye, the science guy, was there. So that,
Yeah.
so a lot of big time names there, or is it a lot of ordinary people as well?
Nothing ordinary about them. There are a lot of brilliant people there. And yeah, definitely a lot of EPO big names.
Yeah,
Steve
too.
Pompey was there.
From also from National Observatory.
Yeah.
Yep. And Derek, Derek's
Derek
last
Pitts.
name? Yeah, Derek Pitts.
Derek
From
Pitts
Franklin
from
Institute was
Franklin
there.
Institute.
Franklin
Yeah.
Institute was there. Yeah, and I think, of course, we already mentioned the Mythbusters.
Yeah.
The guys that were there, and
Cool.
Yeah.
So there were some other special guests as well. And Tim, you mentioned something just before we went on air here that you were related to as well. Tell us about PING.
So PING stands for Physicists Inspiring the Next Generation, Exploring the Cosmos with NRAO. So this is a program that AUI and the National Society of Black Physicists and the National
let me
Radio.
interrupt you for just a
Go
moment. Tell me about AUI. Tell us what that is. I
Okay.
use the words, but tell us what AUI does.
So AUI stands for Associated Universities Incorporated, and we currently have the management contract with the National Science Foundation to manage the National Radio Astronomy Observatories, which the observatories have facilities in New Mexico with the VLA, Green Bank with GPT, and ALMA in Chile. And so we basically receive the funds and take on the fiscal responsibility as well as the strategic management of the observatories themselves. And so, for example, another, you might be familiar with ARA.
Yeah.
ARA does that for NSF and the optical astronomy observatories.
Okay. So back to this young lady here
Yeah.
and her.
So this is Ava, and Ava was one of our PING students that participated in the program at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory in Green Bank, West Virginia, which is where the program is held. This project, or the program itself, targets girls and traditionally underrepresented groups in astronomy and physics, and gives them some exposure to careers, potential careers in astronomy and physics, and inspires them to pursue those careers. And so Ava was, like I said, was one of our middle school students that participated this past year. And as part of the White House Astronomy Night, we were allowed to bring 10 of the PING students to the event, as well as one of their undergraduate student mentor. And they had a great time. And Ava, we were asked to put forward the names of a couple of those students who might be given a special opportunity. And so we did that, and Ava was one of the 14 individuals that met with President Obama just before the event in a special private meeting.
Okay. And so, you know, we've talked a lot here about what happened there, but it all is clearly oriented towards encouraging young people to get more interested and get involved in STEM. And there's been a lot of talk about the STEM, of course, as you mentioned, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. There's been a lot of talk about decline of STEM education or STEM students, that there aren't as many people going into these fields and may not be enough for the future. So it's definitely something that everyone recognizes as very important. So, but one of the things I have to ask is, playing devil's advocate at least, how does this event help that? You had 14 people who met with the president ahead of time, a few hundred people who were at this event, but you know, we've got over 300 million people in this country. What does this do to having a big time event like this? We know that, you know, you guys and David and Andy who've asked questions, and probably others who are watching this, have done a lot of outreach, star parties and so on. We reach a lot of people. What does this event do that might be different in some way? Anybody want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, it gives the idea of a star party more traction than any of our star parties individually do. We might reach 20, 100, 1,000 people in an evening star party where we are. This was broadcast nationwide, and I think people maybe who might not have thought they would go to a star party probably saw this as like, oh, that I can see myself there, hopefully. So perhaps it drives more people at least towards science as an enjoyable hobby, if nothing else.
Yeah, and to kind of build on that, you know, politics is always kind of funny, but politics is always about making your point. It's about communicating a position or stressing something. And the President of the United States stressed astronomy. Okay, and the President of the United States is not just a person; it's an office. It's a representation of the very highest level of the United States. And when you have an event like this that states that, you know, hosting a star party at the White House, not just one time but twice, I think what it does is it gives status, it gives recognition to something that we're all incredibly passionate about. And so I would like to think that in every star party in 2016, somewhere along the way, The Astronomy Night that took place at the White House in October is mentioned and featured to kind of help people to say, you know, this isn't just your passion. This is something that's been recognized at the highest levels in our country. Mm-hmm. And that's, you know, as the U.S. is an example, not, you know, for other nations around the world. You know, this is something that we should build off of, and I think that's what it gives us.
Well, and I would like to answer my own question, which would be why astronomy is something that I've become convinced is really the gateway science to all of the STEM fields. We've seen that both in the U.S. and in other countries. Astronomers Without Borders Telescopes to Tanzania program has been incredibly successful in introducing STEM fields into places that schools that don't even have electricity much of the time and things like that, because the lab is there and everybody is interested in it. And it isn't just for developing countries. The interest in STEM fields, we didn't call them that then, but back in the Apollo era, when I was growing up and watching us going to the moon and walking on the moon and so on, it was huge. People wanted to be astronauts and other things related to this. We don't have the same kind of attitude now, but everyone's still interested in astronomy. And astronomy programs in schools get kids interested. And astronomy is related to everything. It isn't just engineering and technology, other science fields, going into the life science and so on with astrobiology. So I really, for myself, I think astronomy is the way to get people involved, and especially the young people involved in these things, and get excited about what's going on. Get away from the, you know, the smartphones and you know, other things. Earlier on, it was television. In my life, television was going to destroy Western civilization, and before that, I'm sure there was some other technology. But you know, the universe is still there, and we're also, and David knows this well, losing our contact with the night sky. Because of the lights in the cities and so on, which is not the way it was when I was growing up, you know, millennia ago. And so it's still accessible, it's still there, and people don't even realize it.
I think you hit a really important point, Mike, and that is that astronomy is the connecting science. Astronomy in the cosmos is what connects us all together, all the way back, you know, from the Big Bang. You know, when we look at astronomy, its very foundations connects everything that we are today in the current universe, and it certainly is a science that you know, provides opportunity and learning in biology, in chemistry, in engineering. You know, so many things that have been developed through the engineering of the great telescopes that have then gone off to benefit medicine and all of these kinds of things. You know, it is. Astronomy is the great connecting science, and the idea of, you know, featuring this at the White House again is a way to inspire kids to not just become astronomers or astronauts, but to inspire them to pursue STEM degrees or to get interested in STEM fields, because it's not just about the STEM degrees or creating more STEM students with STEM degrees. It's about, you know, you have this incredible workforce, the non-STEM workforce, that really is becoming more and more dependent on STEM skills that people do need to have. And so this is something that that certainly stretches across disciplines, across age levels, across private and public sectors, and so on. And even if you think about it from the light pollution, you brought that up. Look, if we can reduce light pollution and we can conserve energy in doing so, we have a positive impact on climate change.
As well as saving an awful lot of money.
Exactly.
That we're spending billions of dollars sending light into space where it's not doing anybody any good. David asks a question about light pollution and whether or not there was anything at this event at the White House that talked about the idea of losing the stars or medical issues or anything else related to light pollution. Was that presented in anything there?
I didn't see it. Did you, Tim?
No, I
Tyler
didn't.
was there, and he talks a lot about that, but I'm not sure that
Yeah,
Yeah.
we
it's
see anything particularly on that.
Well,
right.
I'm sure you guys and others mentioned that from the middle of Washington, D.C., people were not able to see as much as they otherwise would be able to, which is a shame. But at least letting them know, there are things still up there.
Right, and I think that first of all, the security issues around the White House pretty much mandate a lot of excess when it comes to lighting, and so there really was no way to work around that.
You couldn't get them to turn the lights off, huh?
They did turn quite a few off,
They
actually.
did.
Did
They
they
actually
really?
did.
Okay,
They
that's
did
Yeah.
great. That's
turn some
great.
off. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
what hurt us a little bit more that night is that there was some water vapor that moved into the area. I think in the evening, and that along with the lighting really washed out a lot of the objects.
Well, and you can see, Liam, I don't know if you're showing that, but bring that picture up that you have there. Preparations for the event, looking at the south side of in the portico of the White House. Lots of lights shining up at the building, lots of lights shining out into the crowd. And one light that I'm sure stayed on all night was the ones lighting up the flag on top of the White House. They probably don't turn that off.
Right.
So, yeah, there were going to be lights around there, but I don't think most of us would complain too much about having a little bit of extra light there. They probably do have good reasons for it. So, anyway, so now, I talked a little bit about who was there and so on. 2009 was the first time they did something like this, and that was related to the International Year of Astronomy, and so I was delighted to hear that they were going to do this again. Um, I don't know what the incentive for it was. I don't know what happened at the White House that motivated them to do this. David also asked whether or not there's planning for something next year and beyond, which I think it's been 6 years since the last one. I think it's going to be a while, probably not within this presidency before it's done again. But I know that the whole first family attended and walked around and looked through telescopes and things last time. Did the president and or his family walk around amongst you?
Unfortunately, I think that the telescopes were far enough away this time. In the 2009 event, the telescopes were much closer to the other activities, and the president did make his way around to look through some of the telescopes. But I do think that the telescopes were a bit farther away this time and in a darker area, and I think probably security might have prevented him from doing that. But he also, if you go back and you take a look at the news in October, there were an awful lot of things that were on the president's plate, national security issues and others that were preoccupying him. And so I don't believe he spent as much time at the event milling around this time as he did last time.
So did the first lady or the first children make an appearance? Or the first dog?
No, alas, it was a school night.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
none of them came out. However, the Secret Service, by the end of the night, were looking through the telescopes, which was pretty fun.
Ah, great.
They said it
Well,
was
you
one of
see,
their most enjoyable nights on duty.
yeah, there are lots of stories about amateur astronomers sitting up in a dark place in a state park or something, and the police coming and shining lights and talking to them through megaphones, and then they invite them over to look through the telescopes, and they say, "Oh, that's great. If you guys ever want to come back," they turn very friendly once they realize it's not a security risk. So
Right.
Absolutely.
it has that effect on everyone. Other luminaries that might have gotten out to look through the telescopes and stuff. We know Bill Nye was there. There was a Mythbusters person whose name nobody can seem to
Both
be
of
able
them
to.
were there.
Yeah,
Both of the
Both
both
of
of
Mythbusters.
both.
Yeah.
terrific there.
Yeah, and they gave a talk as well that was, I think, a lot of people went to.
Ah.
Who else was there? Nobody else that pops into my brain.
So they stuck you out a little farther away for darker skies, but a little farther from the people as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
also, you know, like all star parties, it's pretty dark. Like I could have had a lot of people come by who I didn't know were famous.
Well, yeah,
You know who came by mine? One teacher from DC we talked for quite a while. And just so that I didn't have to lug that telescope back to the hotel in a cab, the ASP authorized me to donate it to a local teacher.
Wow.
And so this was a teacher who was a STEM coordinator for 5 schools in the area, downtown Washington, D.C. And she and I started talking for a while, and she had been organizing lots of different fundraising events to get all of her students to go to, in her class in particular, to go to space camp this summer. So we were talking about how to do that, and they had gone last year, and she was just very, very into space. And when we looked at Andromeda, she was amazed that you could see, I mean, given it's a very faint, fuzzy object in the middle of the city, but she was just amazed that you could see that far from downtown DC. And I said, well, you know, do you guys have a telescope that you could look through? And she said no, that they didn't. They had a Galileo scope that they loved, and they brought out, and they even had a tripod for it, but you know, nothing that would see probably a galaxy from downtown DC. And so I was able to give it to her, and she was thrilled. She burst into tears. It was very dramatic. It was really lovely.
Oh, that's so fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think seeing M31 from there, the Andromeda Galaxy, is a pretty good feat. So I'm surprised you're even able to do it really with an 8-inch.
Yeah. Well, and we did talk about light pollution in that way. I said, well, you know, under really dark skies, you can see this without a telescope at all. I mean, the difference between what you could see in the city.
Right.
She had taken the underground, the subway there, so she had to call up. She put a little note out on Facebook, and a bunch of parents from the school showed up in their minivan to come and bring the telescope home.
Wonderful
It was wonderful.
Story.
It was really lovely. She was
so, Tim, I know you have to go in just a few minutes. You're going to leave us a little bit early, but before you do, I want to say that somebody who is watching tells us that the name of the person, the Mythbuster we had there, was Adam Savage.
Ah, yes. Okay, that's it. Yeah.
Which all of us know and should have remembered, but of course none of us would have remembered. And the person who gave us that, I'm going to. The name is there, and I'm going to mangle it. It is Helga Bjarkhaug, I believe.
Well, thank you, Helga. I really appreciate that.
Yes, indeed.
So yes, I know, just to kind of build on something that Viv said there, I know that I had an opportunity to talk to a number of people, because I also had my 35mm camera there, and just doing some basic astrophotography, digital astrophotography, and have had a couple people, and I gave them my card and said, give me a call or send me an email, and I'll point you to some sites where you can just, you know, that has some basic information to get started. And so I've had those emails and have sent them the information. And so those kinds of communications, also talking about, you know, all you have to do is drive an hour and a half west of Washington, D.C., right on 66, and you'll hit the mountains, and there's a couple great astronomy clubs out there that do star parties. And so it was an opportunity to let people know that you know, they had never looked through a telescope. They got to see the moon. They got to see some other objects, but also that there were lots of other opportunities for them just outside the DC Beltway.
Absolutely, yeah. So there are plenty of chances, and I think Vivian, you and I can talk a little bit about that in amateur astronomy as well. Tim, I want to thank you for joining us. I know you've got to get going, and tomorrow you're on the way down to Chile to.
Actually, I'm taking off right now. I'm headed to the airport, and I will.
Oh, you're headed to the airport now. Okay, so
I will be in Chile tomorrow morning.
Yeah, you said you were going to Chile tomorrow, but I guess you better start now. Okay.
It's a long walk.
Yeah, so thanks very much.
Have a piece sour for me, Tim.
I will do that. Thank you, Viv. I will toast to you. So thank you very much. Bye-bye, Mike. And thanks so much.
So Vivian, you know, there are some questions here too like from Andy Sherwood of Astronomers Without Borders in Los Angeles Astronomical Society. How does someone with no background in STEM promote it through astronomy? And I assume that means no background in STEM, such as a college degree or something like that. Because if you
Yeah.
don't know any astronomy, it's kind of hard to promote through it. But there are plenty of amateur astronomers around, and you and I both are very involved in doing outreach and working with amateur clubs. In your case, hundreds of them are across the U.S., and in our case, thousands around the world. Same idea, doing the same things. So what does someone do? One of the things we found when I chaired 100 hours of astronomy in the International Year of Astronomy in 2009, we encouraged people, anybody who had a telescope, to go out and put it on the sidewalk and have people look through it. And people are reluctant to do that sometimes. So we got a lot of people to do it for the first time. And we have a great blog from somebody who did outreach for the first time. People are nervous about it, but it's not about you. It's about the universe. You put out a telescope and get people to look through it and tell them a little bit. That's all there is. I mean, what do you think people should do if they're looking at this and saying, "Yeah, I'd like to do this. I have a telescope. I little." What are the steps to get over the hump there and start doing something?
Yeah, and learn with them. I mean, I have questions all the time. I've been studying astronomy for 15 years, and I have questions come up all the time that I don't know the answers to. And I think, okay, I don't know. That's a perfectly fine answer to give someone. The universe is huge. You cannot possibly know it all. And then learn. I mean, and then say, I don't know, I'll look that up. And then go and look it up, and then next time someone asks, you will know. Yeah, but I agree. Just take the telescope out, put it on the moon or a planet that's up, and start really simple. And if you don't have a telescope, a great pair of binoculars is worth an investment. If you can spend $100 on a really good pair of binoculars, it's such a good way to start learning about the night sky. And join an astronomy club would be the top, my top recommendation.
Always is my top recommendation, because you got other people there and you can see what they're doing and follow their lead. But if you
Oh,
it
we
does.
love talking astronomy.
Yeah, and just but whatever it is you're comfortable with. David tells me to ask you about your book with Linda. Is that
Ah.
related to the topic there?
Thanks for asking. I brought it in case. I do. We just published a book. Can you see it in there?
Uh-huh.
Total Sky Watcher's Manual. It's a great beginner astronomy book. There are even some tips for astrophotography and setting up your own scopes as you get a little further on. I'm actually really proud of it. It's the first time I've written a book like this, and it was a little nerve-wracking along the way because there were so many times that we went and changed things and said, oh no, they took that entirely wrong, and we had to redo a lot of the images. They did a great job with it. It's published by Weldon Owen.
Okay.
And I'm pretty darn pleased with it, I have to
Well,
say.
yeah, you have a lot of experience. I mean, and although you work primarily within the U.S., uh, teaching astronomy to Buddhist monks, if there are people who are watching this who didn't see our hangout, what was it, late last year, I think it
Yeah, it
was?
had to be about this time last year.
I mean, that was a one for the ages. That was a great hangout. Some incredible pictures and experiences, so they should check that out. So you have some pretty broad experience. I found too, well, this is the United States doing this and encouraging STEM. It just, to me, the amateur astronomers around the world are doing pretty much the same kind of thing. And sharing astronomy is the most common activity.
Yeah.
When I got started a long time ago, is people were doing star parties, but they do photography and they have their lists to observe and so on. There's still a lot of that going on. But in most countries, it's about sharing, and I have seen people doing public outreach, astronomy clubs doing public outreach, when they had no telescope, no binoculars, nothing, couldn't afford it. They had posters with news articles and things. So they were just telling people about things with no opportunity to see it other than naked eye and so on. So sharing it is sort of what it's all about. And I think to me, it really is a big deal that the White House was doing something like this and
Yeah.
saying that it is important. What feedback have you gotten from people who, have watched the event, or have you heard anything from the clubs about, this is really great, or, this has helped, or we've gotten people who come to star parties now as a result of this, or is it
Oh, that's a good
anything yet?
question. I haven't heard that kind of feedback. No, I wrote an article for Astronomers Without Borders and a blog post on it, and I've gotten a lot of excitement about it, but not anyone that I know of, and maybe I wouldn't know someone who just started going to star parties because they heard about it.
Or the clubs who have got more people coming saying, we saw this happen at the White House and we thought we'd check it out. I mean, if not, we should take advantage of it.
Yes, yeah,
ASP Night
absolutely.
Sky Network should be doing something with this.
Yeah, yeah. There was definitely a lot of excitement on social media. Facebook, they went wild when it happened. Twitter, people were tweeting out it from all corners of the White House
Hmm.
lawn. So there was definitely a lot of excitement around the event. And it remains to be seen a little bit what'll happen if there's any fallout afterwards. It's been about a month since it happened, um, and it's pretty cloudy a lot of places. Still, it's not the best time
Well,
of year for stargazing
here in San
here in
Francisco.
the U.S.
So, well, anyway, it's been great. I'm glad to get a little bit more of a behind the scenes look at what this was really like for the participants, Vivian, and thanks to you and Tim. And you mentioned your blog post on Astronomers Without Borders as well, which I think is still featured in our slider on the home page. So people, if they want to go there and read that, will be able to do that, find it very easily. In the meantime, we will remain evangelists for astronomy as a way towards advancing science, technology, engineering, mathematics, philosophy, mental health, so many different things.
Yeah,
And so we will continue on that path and do the best we can. Um,
Mike, thanks so much for having me. It's been a
well,
pleasure.
thanks so much for doing this and bringing your experience not only there but with the Night Sky Network as well, which is a fantastic
Thanks.
network that you've got going. And we'll be talking more about what we can do together with Astronomers Without Borders and so on.
Yes.
So as this hour comes to a close, this has been a great program for us to do. We do these hangouts occasionally now, not on a really regular basis, only when there's something very special. And I think this event was very special, and Tim and Vivian were special guests for us. So it was great to be able to do this. You can learn more about the ASP's Night Sky Network at astrosociety.org, and about Vivian's adventures in astronomy, which it sounds a little bit like a children's book. Vivian goes to the moon. Vivian goes to Dharamsala, India to teach Buddhist monks astronomy.
The moon will be next.
The moon will be next. Okay. And at myheadisinthe.stars.wordpress.com. Did I get that right,
I think
Vivian?
so, yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
thanks.
And learn more about Astronomers Without Borders, of course, at astronomerswithoutborders.org. Programs going on. We have a lot of new exciting things coming up, and we are also always raising funds. So we're happy to have any supporters, paid memberships, donations, and if you're looking for a small telescope, just to take a look at the stars to introduce your young children, your students. We have a great, highly reviewed one that we sell thanks to Celestron, who has made it possible for us to sell it at a very discounted cost and still get a lot of money as a result of it. The One Sky telescope, so we can highly recommend that if you're looking for something for Christmas. there are a lot of good options, but this is a very popular one. And for your amateur astronomers out there, it's a great little 5-inch, high-quality tabletop Dob. Grab and go. Grab with one hand, take it out, and so I have to give that a little push there. I should have had a picture ready, but that's the way it goes.
I highly recommend it too. It's amazing.
Thank you, Vivian. So, so that's it for this program. Thanks to our participants and thanks to all of you who watched. Let people know that this will be available in the archives on YouTube as well, and I hope others will join in and take a look. So until next time, for all of us, thanks for joining us.